Harold woke up and stared indifferently at the woman sleeping next to him. He tried to remember her name, but failed. Anyway, it didn't matter, since she was one of the barely known women who always ended up in his bed. They weren't much different from each other, all of them silly, pretentious, greedy dolls with vicious, pouty lips. All the hotties who came to his house were only interested in his money and status. Harold took a cold shower, but he did not feel better, and he went to the kitchen to drink coffee in a bad mood. By this time he was 35. He had never married, and despite the entreaties of his family and friends, he did not particularly strive for it. He had long ago realized that normal women seemed to disappear as dinosaurs, and those who remained were deceitful, fake, and saw him only as a wallet full of money, not as a person. Once he tried to build a happy family life, but nothing good came of it in the end. Bianca was a beautiful woman with ideal parameters, but less than 6 months after the start of their relationship, he could no longer look into her indifferent blue eyes without hatred. He was immensely irritated by her capricious pouty lips and the nasty whiny voice with which she was constantly begging him for something. At first, he was buying her everything she wanted, but one day he could not stand it, and he threw her out on the street, threatening that if she came to him again, he would take away all that he had given her. Upon hearing this, Bianca immediately changed her mind about crying and quickly disappeared. When he saw her next time, she was already sitting in a restaurant trying to charm some man who was old enough to be her father. Since then, Harold did not get into a serious relationship. He just kept changing women one by one. His friend, looking at this, repeatedly advised him to finally find a normal woman and get married. Who should I propose? One of those silicon dolls? You're the lucky one with your wife. There's no one like she anywhere else. Or maybe you're just looking in the wrong place. His friend shook his head reproachfully. This was indeed the case. Harold only came across insensitive gold diggers with the same faces and requests. And now, while he was finishing his morning coffee in bitter reflection, his latest girlfriend came out of the bedroom, unceremoniously took his coffee cup and languidly fluttered her eyelashes, and began the morning performance, the purpose of which was to beg for a gift. Harold was in no mood or desire to waste time on this, so he sighed heavily, took out his wallet, and after counting out several large bills, handed them to the girl. "Go and buy something, and get dressed. I called you a cab." "Great!" The woman's lips stretched into a fake smile, and she quickly disappeared, leaving behind only a cloud of expensive perfume. So a new day began for Harold, no different from the previous ones, but soon an event happened that completely turned his life upside down. One day, in a hurry to the office, Harold did not have time to slow down and doused a woman standing near a crosswalk with dirty water from a puddle. She only groaned and then, looking over herself, burst into tears. Harold stopped to apologize, but the woman pounced on him with accusations. "What have you done? What am I going to do now? I have a job interview at the company in 10 minutes and I'm like this. Who's going to hire me there now? You can't get a good job dressed like that." "What? How dare you insult me? It's not enough that you poured dirty water over me from a puddle, and you're also ridiculing me," shouted the stranger indignantly, and after examining herself once again, proudly headed away. Harold caught up with her in 2 jumps and held her hand. "I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to offend you. And, by the way, I can help with the job. That's why I asked where you are going to apply." "A cleaning company. Would they hire me if I showed up looking like this?" "They wouldn't, but I will. I really need a housekeeper, and I'm willing to pay you well for it. And I'll also buy you new clothes to replace the ruined ones." Harold blurted out quickly and thought the woman would refuse, but she suddenly agreed. "Good, only because I really don't have a chance dressed like this." The woman's name was Lauren, and Harold actually brought her new clothes instead of ruined ones. Then he took her home, where he showed her everything she would be doing. "I'm honestly sick of looking for an assistant to clean the apartment, plus I'm always afraid they'll break something. Anyway, take a look around, and I have to go to work. I'm long overdue. And even though the bosses aren't late, they're delayed. It's unseemly to overuse my permission for so long." Lauren nodded and assured Harold that everything would be ready for him when he arrived. In the evening, when Harold returned home, he didn't recognize his apartment. The place was clean and tidy, and the smells of homemade food wafted in from the kitchen. "Lauren, you're just a magician. I can't remember the last time I had a home-cooked meal. Did you make all this yourself?" exclaimed the delighted man. "Of course, there's so much in your kitchen. It's a pleasure to cook." Harold offered the woman to have dinner with him, but she began to refuse and said that as soon as she had cleaned up everything in the kitchen, she would go straight home, since it was already late. Then Harold began to insist that she should stay in the house and occupy one of the empty rooms. "No, please, that is inconvenient. You and I don't know each other much at all." "Lauren, I trusted you with my apartment and didn't even look at your passport. What more proof do you need? If you are afraid of me, you should know that all the rooms can be securely locked from the inside. Say yes, Lauren. Or is there someone waiting for you at home?" After learning that the woman lives alone in the dormitory, Harold began to insist even more, and Lauren finally gave up with a smile and agreed. At dinner, the man asked why she lived in the dormitory, and Lauren told him that she had to leave her home village for the city after her divorce from her husband, with whom she had been married for only 2 hours. Harold couldn't believe this was possible, but Lauren explained that 2 hours after the wedding, she caught her husband kissing another girl. Despite his pleas for forgiveness, she could not forgive him and stay. "Lauren, you're amazing. I've never met anyone like you." "No, I'm the most ordinary." Lauren brushed it off and got up from the table and started to clear the dishes. But with each passing day, Harold became more and more convinced that he was right. The woman turned out to be an excellent hostess. She constantly treated Harold with culinary masterpieces. His closet was always clean and ironed, and the apartment was in perfect order. However, that was not the main thing. Harold liked Lauren as a woman, and he did not know what to do about it. She was different, and it was impossible to get reciprocity from her the way he was used to, in exchange for money and gifts. She kept herself very strict, never took more money than they had agreed on the first day, and always kept her distance. Harold was even ready to marry her, but he knew that none of his family and friends would approve of his choice, because she was not one of their circle. But he could not leave Lauren either, and it was as if Harold had gone mad. One night, when he came home drunk, Harold gave Lauren the appraising look and started to make unambiguous hints to her from the very threshold. Lauren was surprised at first and did not understand what was going on, but then, realizing that the man was in an inadequate state, she recoiled and, apologizing, tried to go to her room. But Harold prevented her from doing so. He stepped toward her and, squeezing her tightly in his arms, began to cover her with kisses. Lauren tried to break free and finally, freeing one hand, hit Harold hard in the face. Harold gasped in surprise and loosened his grip. "How dare you behave like that? I'm paying you, so you belong to me. I bought you everything. Take off your clothes right now." After giving him a second slap, Lauren broke free and ran to her room, and Harold, out of rage, pounded on her door with his fists for a long time, showering her with insults. "Stop playing hard to get. You're all the same. You only want one thing." Tired of arguing, Harold called one of his girlfriends, and within half an hour they were having fun in his bedroom. The next morning brought Harold back a few months. The girl next to him was uninteresting to him, and he immediately escorted her out the apartment. Lauren was no longer in the house too. In her room, he found all the things he had bought her stacked evenly. Seeing this, the man sat down on the bed, involuntarily realizing that Lauren will not return, and he himself had destroyed the happiness he may have had. Harold knew almost nothing about her, but he looked on the only thread, a dormitory. There were not many of them in the city, and soon Harold found the one where Lauren lived. But Lauren was not there. After finding out from her neighbor the address of the village where she was from, Harold rushed there, but it was empty too. Leaning against the low gate, Harold thought about it, not knowing where to look for the girl now. But then an elderly man suddenly called out to him. "What do you want here, boy?" "Good afternoon. I'd like to see Lauren. We had a quarrel with her. I hurt her and she left. I thought she was here." "No, she left a long time ago and never came back." "So, you fell in love with her?" asked the elderly man. "Yes, completely and irrevocably. I want to marry her." "You can't do that." "Why is that?" Harold looked at the old man in surprise. "Because you're a bad man if you hurt a girl like Lauren. Her soul is kind and open, and if she loves someone, she'll love them for life. I've known her since she was a baby. She's always helped everyone and taken care of everybody. But if someone hurt her, she'd never forgive him. It was the same with her husband. She loved him and wouldn't listen to anyone, though everyone told her he was a real womanizer. And he also thought that if he married her and took her into his rich house, he would be able to wipe his feet with her. But it wasn't like that. He cheated on her right at the wedding, so she packed her bags and left right away. After talking to the elderly man, Harold was completely upset. In case Lauren still turns up, he wanted to leave her his phone number and even offered a large sum of money as a thank you, but the elderly man flatly refused. Then Harold hugged him goodbye, got in the car and drove away, and the elderly man looked after him for a long time, and then suddenly fumbled in his jacket pocket for the money that Harold had discreetly put him there. Grinning, he shook his head. "Oh, you're so sneaky. It seems that our Lauren has fallen hard in your soul, and you have offended her for nothing." 3 months passed. All this time, Harold continued to look for Lauren, but to no avail. He even hired a private detective, but he was unable to find anything out. Harold forgot about his former life and did not want to see anyone. One day his parents called him, and after reminding him that he had not visited them for a long time, they persuaded him to come over for dinner. Harold could not refuse his mother, and having bought a bouquet of flowers, came to the parents. They sat down at the table, and the maid brought the first course. Harold, looking at the woman, almost lost the power of speech. He jumped up, knocking over a chair, and shouted, "Lauren, darling, how long I've been looking for you! My darling!" Lauren was confused. All this time, she constantly thought about Harold and tried her best to forget him. And now it turned out that she had been working at his parents' house all this time. Lauren hurried to put the dishes on the table and wanted to leave quickly, but Harold held her hand and, standing on one knee, said, "Please, marry me. I love you. I can't live without you." Lauren stood silently, not knowing what to do in this situation, and Harold's mother came up to her son, took the expensive ring off her finger and said, "Your father once proposed to me with this ring. Let it be inherited, and you and Lauren will be as happy as your daddy and me." Lauren looked at Harold's parents. They were smiling. She nodded and hid her happy face on Harold's chest.